Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere you've probably never grocery shopped before, through the dusty, humming, labyrinthine market streets of ancient Babylon. The air smells like baked mud and ripe dates, the stalls are loud, the goats are louder, and everyone seems to have strong opinions on barley. You dodge a cart stacked with red baskets. A donkey snorts at you with full contempt. Vendors bark in Akkadian while waving clay tokens at confused customers. And here's the thing. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in this market. Between the unfamiliar food, aggressive bargaining, and occasional camel stampede, you'd end up trading your shoes for a handful of salted fish before realizing that, no, that's not even a fair deal. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it by you? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing just outside the Ishtar Gate, Babylon's massive blue-glazed marvel, staring down a road thick with market chatter, clanging pans, and the faint sound of someone yelling about lentils. You step in, past the lion-tiled bricks, and into the daily rhythm of Mesopotamian life. The temperature is already warm, dry heat that bakes the stone under your sandals, and the smells drift in layers. Burnt fish, sun-warmed onions, dust, and something like vinegar. The market stretches long, sectioned not by clean signage, but by smells and noise levels. Near the entrance, you see rows of clay jugs. Water sellers line up beside bread vendors. Children weave through legs, chasing a one-eyed dog. A vendor yells something about honey. Another hurls a surprisingly detailed insult at someone's sheep. It's a mix of the sacred and the spectacularly mundane. On one side, priests in long robes haggle for incense. On the other, a man is loudly trying to return spoiled figs by claiming they cursed his daughter. The grocery list here isn't written on paper, it's pressed into wet clay. Shoppers carry small tablets with lists etched in careful cuneiform, probably double-checked by their household scribes. You passed one woman clutching a basket and a stylus, muttering under her breath, 3 jars of oil, barley for the temple, and no more fermented fish, unless he wants to sleep outside. Historians still argue whether most people were literate enough to write shopping lists, but evidence from recovered tablets shows that market records were incredibly detailed. Not just what was bought, but who sold it, when, and how much. Silver changed hands. The vendors are you, with a blend of hospitality and suspicion. Mostly suspicion, as you're recurrently staring at a hanging string of garlic like it is a lunar eclipse. You shuffle forward, sandaled feet brushing against scattered chickpeas and onion skins. To your left, 2 donkeys snort loudly and bray in chorus. One of them sounds a bit like your uncle trying to sing karaoke. Someone offers you a slice of barley cake. It's dense, slightly sweet, and might be older than you are. You nod politely and chew like it's your favorite dessert. This is how deals are made, slowly, with snacks and lots of stalling. In the heat of late morning, the market throbs with life. Clay pots clink together. Women shout greetings across stalls. And somewhere nearby, a minor argument erupts over whether someone actually paid for that goat leg. A small crowd gathers. The goat, notably, is still attached to the leg in question. You keep moving. You spot a shaded corridor of stalls draped in woven red mats. This seems like the high-end stuff: imported spices, dyed wool, and perfumed oil. A man waves you over to sniff. What he promises is the purest sesame oil in all of It smells nutty, fresh, and possibly laced with something illegal. You nod and wander away before he tries to sell you 10 jugs. You reach a central square of the market flat. Bright, packed, This is where bulk goods live. Grains in huge sacks, fish laid out on red mats, and rows of baked bricks, each stamped with a cellarest symbol so you know who to blame if your lentils give you stomach cramps. A clay tablet is nailed to a wooden post nearby. It lists daily prices, scribbled with an authority that suggests they're more guidelines than rules. One line reads, "Fine barley, 1 shekel for 3 Cs." You pretend you know what that means, and keep walking. An older man next to you mutters, "Last week it was 4 Cs. Crooks! Bartering is the name of the game. Prices shift with the moon, the river, and the rumor mill. If the Tigris floods, onions triple in price. If someone sneezes too close to the grain cart, the lentils get discounted. Supply chain drama Babylon style. You brush past a scribe taking furious notes. He's working for a temple, tracking purchases for a monthly tithe. One of his tablets is smeared with something oily. You suspect it from the roast goat stall 4 feet away, which has at least 3 cats lounging nearby in suspiciously greasy contentment. A boy runs past with a basket of fish heads. You don't ask. It's better that way. The sun creeps higher. You find a clay cup of water and sip it slowly, cool, clean, surprisingly citrusy, probably drawn from a canal upstream before the goats had their morning bath. And then a voice behind you booms. "Best dates in the city. Sweet enough to make the gods smile?" You turn. A man with 6 teeth and infinite enthusiasm offers you a sample. You take it. It is sweet enough to make the gods smile. Somewhere behind you, someone drops a clay pot. It shatters into a dozen pieces. Nobody flinches. You step carefully around it and realize something. This market isn't chaotic. It's just alive. A living, breathing organism of trade, taste, and tightly budgeted goat parts. And you've only just walked in. You ease farther into the marketplace, tugged gently along by the scent of flour and warm stone. The noise thins just slightly here, in the bread section. People speak with an air of reverence, not because they're calm, but because this is the staple. In Babylon, bread isn't just food. It's daily ritual, economic measure, and sometimes divine offering. A boy waves a paddle toward a clay oven's mouth, pulling out flat rounds, steaming with heat, and coated in a sheen of oil. He stacks them with practiced ease, 1, 2, 3 before shooing away a goat, attempting to nibble the top loaf. You slow your steps. The stalls ahead overflow with all kinds of barley bread. Barley, barley, always barley. Wheat existed too, but that was for temples, the rich, or people with good teeth. One vendor, grizzled, wiry, dusted in flour, leans over his stall. Thick bread, thin bread, honey bread, onion bread, even priest bread, he mutters. You're tempted to ask what priest bread is, but he's already pulled out a crumbling, triangular slice. It smells like smoke and fennel, possibly regret. You nibble politely. Most bread is baked daily, though sometimes they let it go just stale enough to be dipped in oil or beer. Some are shaped into discs, others braided like ropes. The temple bakeries make bread stamped with divine symbols, tiny suns, lions, and once, confusingly, what looks like a dancing duck. Historians still argue whether those stamped loaves were used in ceremonies, sacrifices, or simply to show off. One clay tablet suggests that sun bread was offered at sunrise, while fish bread may have been for river god. Another tablet implies it was just marketing, Babylonian advertising at its finest. By the bread Marduk would eat, you notice another detail. Some loaves are stacked in bowls, shaped from hardened fig leaves. Others are wrapped in strips of linen, expensive, yes, but reusable. A woman in front of you is negotiating over 10 loaves, each stamped with a cuneiform symbol. You lean in, and catch the symbol for offering repeated twice. Maybe she's prepping for a festival, or maybe her household just really likes crunchy. The sun shifts above you, casting thin shadows across the stone. The flower dust floats in sunbeams like golden fog. You breathe in the scent. Grain, ash, a bit of honey, and a trace of that elusive smell that every city market shares across time, sweat, and anticipation. Barley for the gods, barley for the belly. Someone chants. You turn and spot a man singing as he kneads dough beside a clay oven. He slaps it onto the inside wall with flair. In moments, it bubbles, crisps, and peels off naturally like magic. Magic made of ash, yeast, and back pain. Babylon's scribes recorded over 300 different kinds of bread. Some were simple, plain discs served with soup or beer. Others were cakes sweetened with dates and spices used for birthdays, weddings, or bribes. One recipe etched on a broken tablet found near Sipper describes mixing barley flour with milk, dates, and ground sesame, then pressing it into molds shaped like fish. Historians call it one of the earliest snack cakes ever found. Modern snack fans call it something I'd definitely try once. You notice a girl helping her father organize orders. Each customer has a clay token with a symbol: a cow, a star, a double zigzag. He hands over the matching bread, takes a handful of barley or silver shavings, and slips the token onto a string. A kind of loyalty program. Primitive? Yes. Effective? Extremely. You edge toward a nearby table stacked with darker loaves, denser, likely baked for longer trips. These travel breads last 4 weeks and tastes like compressed patience, often baked twice. They're intended for messengers, soldiers, and people who don't mind chewing for 20 minutes straight. You take a bite of one out of curiosity. It tastes like sadness, but in a nourishing way. One man passes you carrying a round of bread the size of a shield. He's sweating, the bread is steaming. Newborn celebration, someone says behind you. You nod, as if you'd guessed. At the edge of the bread row, you spot something curious. A series of odd, triangular cakes painted with crushed fruit and wrapped in palm leaves. You ask the vendor, who grins and replies, "Festival bread, special occasions, not for every tongue." You'd buy one anyway. It's sour, tangy, slightly bitter, probably meant to be dipped in something stronger than water. Still, there's something nice about it, like tasting history with your molars. You pass a priest in long robes, inspecting loaves. He points to a stack and murmurs something about moon cycles. The vendor nods gravely and lowers his voice. You realize they rediscussing first of the month bread, a sacred type made from barley ground during a full moon. It must rise without human touch, only through natural warmth. Some believe it carries prophetic dreams. Others believe it carries indigestion. History hasn't chosen a side. You'll step away. The bread scent now trailing behind you like warm fog. A young boy runs past with a basket full of warm rolls, each tied with a little red cord. They're gifts for neighbors. His sandals slap loudly against the stone. You smile. Bread in Babylon isn't just a meal. It's math, ritual, economy, celebration, and no matter how ordinary the loaf, someone, somewhere, likely baked it with hope. You drift into the next cluster of stalls, guided by a peculiar aromanati sour, a little like warm porridge left in the sun. It's the unmistakable scent of beer, and in Babylon, that doesn't mean a tavern. It means you've entered the next crucial zone of the grocery list. Beer in ancient Mesopotamia wasn't just a beverage. It was a food group, a breakfast staple, and occasionally a religious requirement. And you're about to understand why everyone, yes, Everyone is slightly buzzed by mid. The first thing you notice is a woman stirring a giant ceramic vat with a paddle longer than your arm. The contents bubble softly, giving off the scent of fermented barley and crushed dates. A clay label nearby reads, "Mild beer 3 days old." Someone next to you whispers, "Any older," and it walks off on its own. You pass a row of amphory big-bellied jars sealed with wax and marked with symbols: a barley stalk, a crescent moon, a turtle for reasons unclear. Each symbol means something: strength, sweetness, maybe which temple blessed the batch. A few are labeled priest quality. You assume that means extra strong or extra divine. The vendors are quick to offer samples. Small clay cups, roughly the size of a baby's fist, are passed around like communion. You sip one, it's cloudy, warm, and sour like overripe apples, thick with floating mash, basically liquid bread. Someone slaps your shoulder. "Not bad for morning beer?" You nod, unsure if that's a compliment or a warning. Babylonians loved their beer enough to rank it meticulously. There was Kos, the everyday brew, Dedu, thicker and stronger, sometimes eaten with a spoon, and Koronu, the luxury beer, usually reserved for festivals, temple offerings, or very persuasive bribes. Historians still argue whether beer was taxed based on strength or barley content. One recovered tablet implies that stronger beer required a priest's blessing. Another tablet, hilariously, simply says, "No beer for lazy workers." You walk past a booth where a man chants over jars of bubbling brew. He's not blessing them, he's naming them. Little Thunder 7, Eyes of Marduk. You try not to laugh when he hands a woman a jug labeled donkey sleep. She thanks him solemnly. The connection between beer and bread becomes clearer the more you observe. Both come from barley, both use yeast, and both have been known to start domestic arguments. One stall sells barley bread with beer baked into it. You're not sure if it's genius or a cry for help. You take a bite. It tastes like ambition and mild fermentation. Not bad. A group of laborers gathers near a shaded area, sitting cross-legged and slurping from a communal jar with long red straws. This is normal. Beer wasn't just a market treat. Workers were often paid in beer, measured in silurefli, a litre. The more important your job, the better your buyer. Scribes might get spiced brews. Builders got thick mashy stuff. Soldiers, well, they got whatever didn't kill them. Even a temple tablet that describes how to brew beer as an offering to the goddess Ning. The hymn to her is part poem, part recipe, part hazy memory. It goes something like, "You are the one who bakes the barley in the great oven. You are the one who waters the malt on the floor." You squint and realize it's the Mesopotamian version of an IPA label. Nearby, a teenage girl squats beside a vat, measuring barley with careful fingers. Her father counts aloud, flicking small beads into a dish as she works. 7 shekels for a mild brew, 10 if you want the strong one, he tells a customer. 15 if you want to remember none of today. You move along the row and find a curious jar labeled simply for sleep. You sniff it. Licorice root, fennel, and something else, a sleepy punch in the nose. You raise an eyebrow. The vendor grins. Night beer, just 1 cup. Trust me. You don't trust him, but you buy it anyway. You pass a set of wall carvings nearby. They show men and women drinking from the same massive bowl straws, poking out like reeds in a swamp. Celebration or ceremony, it's hard to say, but someone's grinning, and someone's clearly passed out. Babylonian society didn't treat beer like a visit, was daily fuel. One priest wrote that to lack beer is to lack joy. Another warned against overindulgence, saying, "If you drink the 7th cup, May your sandals find you without feet. A little poetic, a little threatening. Beer was considered safer than river water. It was boiled, fermented, and full of calories. People trusted it more than they trusted their neighbors' wells. You finally find a small vendor surrounded by sleeping dogs. He offers a cup for the soul. You sip. It's spiced, oddly floral, and immediately calming. The man leans in and whispers, "Brewed under moonlight. 4 dreams." You thank him. He nods with mysterious satisfaction, then scolds a dog for chewing a jug handle. By now, your stomach feels warm. Your basket is heavier. And your vision, well, it's definitely softer around the edges. You ease away from the beer stalls, past a woman carefully sealing her jug with wax and a prayer, and head toward your next destination. There's still fruit to find, and if you're lucky a date with dates, you follow your no-sticky sweet, syrup-thick air guiding your feet through the next bend of Babylon's bustling marketplace. It doesn't take long to find the source. Date mountains of them, sticky, glistening, brown and gold, heaped in baskets woven from reeds, and guarded by vendors who seem entirely too proud of their sugary stockpiles. Here, in this narrow row of low canopies, you've entered what can only be described as a paradise for sweet-toothed Sumerians. A little boy slouches by with juice on his chin and hands glued together from pure fructose. An older woman shuffles past carrying a clay jar of what looks like date syrup, muttering, "He better appreciate this, or I'm pouring it on the dog." You stop at a stall boasting what the seller calls sun-kissed warrior dates. They're big, dark, and wrinkled like small fists. She offers you one, still warm from sitting in the sun. You bite. It's chewy, rich, and so sweet, it practically rearranges your memory. Babylonian markets treated dates like modern supermarkets treat sugar, which makes sense, since this was sugar. No cane, no honey in every home, just these dark little gifts from palm trees. They were eaten plain, mashed into cakes, stuffed with nuts, baked into bread, boiled into syrup, and used to flavor everything from stews to beer. And here's the kicker, they were currency too. Laborers sometimes received rations in dates, temples accepted them as offerings, and if you didn't want to carry silver around the street, you could pay in jars of date paste. Historians still argue whether the date tax applied to just the fruit or to everything sweetened by it. Some clay records show temple scribes demanding jars by volume. Others indicate traders fudged their numbers by watering down the paste with mashed beans. Yes, bean fraud. Babylon wasn't above it. You take a few more steps. A vendor behind a shaded table is wrapping dates in soft leaves, likely palm fronds, then tying them up with thin twine to form small, square bundles. "Traveler's cakes," he says. "A week on these and you'll outrun camels." You're skeptical, but he doesn't blink. You buy one. A few stalls down, you find jars of thick black date syrup called zikaru. By some, it clings to the edge like tar and smells like brown sugar kissed by raisins. One jar has a small red spoon sticking out. You try a taste. It's intense, like molasses on a mission. The vendor nods approvingly. Good for cough, also good for marriage disputes. You don't ask him to elaborate. Just beyond the syrup stall, you encounter a woman ladling out globs of mashed dates mixed with barley flour, little balls rolled in sesame seeds. "Temple sweet," she says with a grin. You take one and immediately understand why the gods got first dibs. It's chewy, earthy, and just complex enough to make you wonder if this counts as a religious experience. Not far off, 2 scribes are arguing over a tablet. They're surrounded by jars and dried bundles of fruit. One of them insists that sun-dried is superior, while the other insists shade-dried gives better dreams. You slip by quietly before they drag you into a theological snack debate. There's another date vendor near a well who's selling slightly fermented dates. You pop one in your mouth before asking questions. It tastes sharp, not bad, just vaguely alcoholic. He grins and holds up a finger. 3 days too long in the jar. We call it sleepy date. At least he's honest. Palm trees were sacred in Mesopotamia, symbols of life, fertility, even resurrection, so it makes sense that dates were woven into every part of society. One recovered tablet includes a recipe for a ceremonial cake made with dates, honey, flour, and crushed spices, possibly cinnamon or cardamom. It's unclear if this was a royal dessert or something whipped up to bribe temple officials. The line between divine and delicious was very, very thin. You pass a woman carefully layering dates into a clay dish, then topping them with nuts. She seals it with a cloth soaked in wine, ties it shut, and places it in a reed basket. Wedding gift, she explains. You smile and move on. To your left, a boy balances a tray of roasted date paste rounds on his head, singing a little tune about how if the paste is sour, it means the cook is sad. You like the logic. The ground here is slick with juice. You step carefully to avoid slipping on a rogue pit. Someone behind you mutters a curse and drops a whole jar, which breaks open and immediately attracts flies, bees, and 2 very opportunistic goats. A temple guard pushes past with a jar in each hand. He nods at the vendors, who bow slightly. Temple personnel shop with an air of unspoken authority, possibly because they're buying for the gods, or possibly because no one wants to get hexed over a mislabeled fig. As you near the end of this sugary lane, you'll realize how many jars you've now got crammed into your basket. 3 kinds of dates. 1 mystery syrup. 2 unwrapped sweets you meant to just sample. And a clay dish with a lid you think contains stuffed figs, but might actually be pickled locusts. You decide not to check yet. There's something oddly comforting about how central fruit is to this society. Not a garnish, not a topping. Fruit is economy, ritual, and dessert all at once. You chew the last of your roasted date ball and head onward. Your next stop, something savory, something protein-packed, and hopefully something that doesn't squirm, meets just ahead. You catch the scent, now grilled, smoked, maybe slightly too aged. Your grocery list marches on. You've barely left the comforting sweetness of dates behind when the air changes thicker. There's a deep animal warmth to it. A scent of char, fat, and something suspiciously metallic. You've reached the meat section. It hits you immediately. This is where Babylon gets primal. The first thing you see is a man waving a cleaver in one hand and a leg of goat in the other. He's yelling prices at nobody in particular. His apron streaked with enough blood to raise eyebrows in any other context. Here, though, it's just another Tuesday. Beside him, hanging from crude wooden racks, are ribs, shoulders, kidneys, and other, less identifiable cuts. Flies buzz, lays, cats loiter with dangerous purpose, and you suddenly very aware of your sandals and how close they are to puddles. You'd rather not identify. Welcome to Babylon's Butcher Row. You edge toward a small stall with a well-shaded table. There, a woman in a crisp linen scarf carefully unwraps a preserved meat bundle. It's wrapped in cloth, soaked in herbs, and tied with red fiber. Salted lamb, she says proudly. 3 days dry, 4 days smoke. You nod like that means something. Meat preservation was essential in this climate. Without refrigeration, Babylon relied on salt, smoke, and prayers. Dried meat hung in the sun, packed in jars with fat, or buried in cool sand beneath brick houses. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. Historians still argue whether ancient Babylonians had true jerky or more of a cured paste. One recovered recipe simply reads: mash meat, add salt, stuff into intestine, hang until flies, ignore it. Helpful. You pass a man chopping fish heads and goat hooves with equal enthusiasm. He grins at you. You don't stop. There is a stall with a spit turning slowly over coals, thick smoke rising as a haunch of something sizzles. Possibly goat, possibly wild pig, possibly something whose name you don't want to learn. A small crowd gathers, clutching flatbread to catch the drippings. You do the same. The vendor slices you a piece. It's spicy, greasy, and probably your favorite bite so far. Behind him, a child fans the fire with palm fronds. Another boy holds skewers, watching them like they might escape. You glance toward the temple end of the row, where robed men are loading baskets of meat onto carts. These are offerings, select cuts, taken directly to priests. According to recovered temple records, meat distribution followed strict shoulder cuts for priests, organs for scribes, legs for guards, feet for someone. You pause at a display of animal parts so strange, it feels less like a butcher's table and more like an anatomy quiz. There's a cow's tongue tied with string, a pair of sheep lungs drying in the sun, and a pile of tails, just tails. No explanation. You stare too long. The vendor smiles too much. Next to you, a vendor slices off paper-thin bits of smoked duck breast. She offers one to you on a bit of reed. It's delicate, salty, and slightly sweet. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. River ducks eat dates. So do we. You hear the distant bleat of a very unhappy goat. You try not to make eye contact with the man dragging it past you. He's humming. In the next stall, air-dried sausages hang in loops. Dark, cured, flecked with seeds. A small sign pressed into clay reads, "Good for journeys, also for revenge." You laugh. The vendor does not. There's a smaller stall tucked into the shadow of a crumbling brick wall. There, a quiet man sells only organ meats, liver, heart, kidneys, brains. He works methodically, his hands quick and practiced. A basket nearby holds little stone weights, used to balance price by mass. You ask if he ever eats what he sells. He says, without looking up, "No, I have daughters." Fair. One of the stranger booths specializes in pickled meats. You see chunks of flesh suspended in thick yellow brine, sealed under wax. There's no label. The vendor just says, "You want strong." You shake your head and move on. To your left, two older men argue over a wrapped bundle. One insists it's cow. The other says deer. A third voice chimes in. "Jackal." You walk faster. There is a moment of levity as a small goat escapes its pen and barrels through the crowd, followed by 3 children, 2 laughing women, and one very angry man with a ladle. The goat disappears into a basket stall. Nobody tries too hard to catch it. You stop at a table with jars of meat, paste ground, spiced, fermented. You take a sample on a strip of bread. It tastes surprisingly modern, savory, complex, umami. You ask what's in it. The vendor leans in and whispers. If you don't ask, you get more. You decline seconds. A few stalls specialize in poultry, ducks, doves, quail. They're mostly sold whole, sometimes alive. A boy in the corner is whispering to a chicken as if negotiating its fate. You hope they come to an understanding. And finally, in a sun-drenched corner of the meat row, you'll find a display of skewered mystery cuts roasting over a pit. The vendor gestures to them proudly. "Festival meat," he says. "What kind?" you ask. He shrugs. "Depends on the festival." You buy one anyway. It's spicy, smoky, and suspiciously chewy. Still, not bad. Your basket now smells like 5 animals, and a regrettable decision. The meat row has given you plenty protein, questions, and mild anxiety. You step away slowly, licking your fingers and hoping that festival didn't mean rat. Ahead, you hear a splash, a shout, the unmistakable flapping sound of fish on clay. It's time for seafood. Babylon. The moment you round the corner into the fish market, the air changes again. Sharp, briny, with a hint of algae and whetstone. It's the kind of smell that crawls inside your nose and sets up camp. And whether you love it or hate it, it says only one thing. Fish. You're inland, yes, but Babylon hugs the Euphrates River like a lifeline, and that river is teeming with aquatic surprises. Some delicious, some alarming. You step over a shallow puddle that squelches suspiciously and find yourself surrounded. Rows of red mats stretch in every direction, each covered with fresh catches from that morning. Carp, catfish, eels, something with too many teeth, and another thing that's definitely blinking. One stall proudly displays its catch on curved clay, trays heads pointed west, tails still twitching. The vendor smiles at you with the pride of a man who got up at 4 a.m. and knows it. Straight from the Euphrates, he says, wiping his hands on a fishgill-covered cloth, still dreaming of the river. You lean in. A fat carp stares back. You nod solemnly. Fish was a dietary staple for Babylonians, especially in lower-income households where red meat wasn't affordable. River fish were abundant, easy to cook, and, if smoked or dried, they kept for days. There are cuneiform tablets that list no fewer than 50 types of fish, from the humble minnow to the fearsome river wolf, probably a big catfish with confidence issues. Historians still argue whether Babylonians farmed fish intentionally, or just built canals that accidentally became breeding grounds. Either way, the city was never short of seafood, especially when a summer flood brought in new, slimy surprises. A woman near you flies away from a stack of salted eels, then slaps one lightly and mutters something about bad omens. You keep your distance. In the next stall, a boy is gutting fish with expert flicks of a tiny bronze knife. He's humming, his hands moving faster than your eyes can follow. Nearby, his mother sorts the organs into little bowls: liver, stomach, roe. Nothing goes to waste here. You pick up a dried fish, paper thin and stiff as bark. The vendor leans in and says, "Boil it. Just don't smell it too early." You nod slowly and put it in your basket anyway. A different table boasts marinated fish, small ones, soaked in vinegar, herbs, and what might be date syrup. You taste one. It's sharp, sweet, chewy, and exactly the sort of thing that would polarize a dinner party. In the far corner, you discover a fishmonger with a flair for drama. He's balancing a massive catfish across his shoulders like a sacrificial offering, shouting, 6 shekels and it sings. It doesn't, but it does flop violently. Children scream, adults laugh. The fishmonger bows like a street performer. You move on. There's a stall you almost miss, just a low mat with jars, sealed tight and carefully labeled. The woman sitting behind it has silver-streaked hair and the calm demeanor of someone who knows her fish sauce is better than yours. You ask what's inside. She taps one of the jars. Fermented for 30 days. Anchovy and garlic. The gods ask for it by name. You'll raise your eyebrows. She leans in, grinning, but only after the 3rd cup of beer. It's Babylonian, garama pungent, fermented fish sauce that adds depth to stews and soups. The recipe is whispered more than written. Every family has their own version, and none of them admit it smells like regret. You buy a jar. You do not open it, just past her. A clay tablet sits propped up on a wooden crate. It lists the types of fish available that day, in elegant cuneiform. You're not sure. There's a symbol you don't recognize. Part fish, part knife, part dramatic flourish. One scholar believes it might refer to a now-extinct predator fish. Another thinks it's a chef's inside joke. Either way, you move on before someone tries to sell you prehistoric seafood. Next, a woman offers you a grilled fishtail wrapped in a reed. You take a bite. It's smoky, flaky, with just a hint of salt crusted from the river mud. Delicious. You buy 2 more. Farther down, another stall sells dried fish heads, strung like garlands. Decorative or edible? Yes. One vendor is carefully weighing a pile of small river fish using a balance scale and a handful of clay weights shaped like ducks. You admire the craftsmanship more than the fish. A passing priest picks up a jar of smoked eel, examines it like it might bite him, and mutters something about omens. The vendor just shrugs. Eels never wrong. Somewhere nearby, a fish flops off a table and lands at your feet. You blink. It blinks back. You take a step back and let the owner scoop it up with a practiced sigh. You finally reach the last. Staller. A man sits behind a steaming pot, ladling out fish soup with an aroma both inviting and risky. You accept a small bowl. Inside, thin broth, barley, tiny fish, bones, coriander, and something spicy that hits the back of your throat like a soft slap. It's comfort food if you grew up near a river and never feared bones. As you sip the last of the soup, you notice a sign above the stall. Nothing wasted, everything honored. That about sums up Babylon's fish obsession. Nothing was overlooked, nothing discarded. Even the eyes were used for what? You don't ask. Your basket is now heavier, your nose permanently altered, and your next stop beckons with the promise of something simpler. Cheese. Or something trying very hard to be cheese. You press onward, nose still full of river funk and salted eel memory. But now the air begins to shift. Cooler, calmer, softer somehow. A gentle temps floats in. Sour milk, herbs, something grainy and nutty beneath it all. You've arrived at the dairy stalls. Or, in Babylon's case, the things we can coax out of milk before it turns against us section. It's quieter. Hear fewer yells. Fewer goats wandering off with someone's sandals in their mouth. Instead, there's a calm domestic rhythm. Clay jars being opened, linen wrappings unfurled, and little wooden spoons clicking gently against stone bowls. The first vendor you meet is a woman in a blue scarf, her hands stained white with powdered chalk and curds. She lifts the lid off a broad, flat container to reveal something creamy, off-white, and trembling slightly. Sour curd, she says, with a proud little nod. 2 days old. Goat milk. Kept in shadow, turned at dawn. You blink at her precision. You take a small spoonful. It's sharp, a little fizzy on the tongue, tangy enough to startle, but not offend. Almost like Greek yogurt's wild desert cousin. Cheese in Babylon isn't quite the wheel-shaped brie or cheddar you're used to. Most dairy was soft, fermented, slightly sour, and meant to be consumed quickly before the heat took its toll. Hard cheese existed, but rarely. Think clumps, not cubes. A stall nearby is selling what looks like sun-dried cheese, patties, round, flat, and marked with thumbprints. Milk bread, says the seller. You pick one up. It smells like goat time and stubbornness. You buy 2. A young boy jogs past, balancing a basket of tiny jars, each sealed with wax. You ask what's inside. Curd with herbs, he shouts cheerfully. His voice cracks. The jars clink. You feel oddly hopeful for him. Historians still argue whether Babylonian cheesemaking was a household craft, or more often managed in temple kitchens. Some tablets imply large-scale curdling operations, especially for offerings to gods like Nis. Others suggest it was mostly rural women, working barefoot and humming while straining goat milk through woven cloth. You wander over to a stall draped in linen to block the sun. Inside, pots of white paste, pale gold oil, and lumps of something pale pink. You're told this is Labneh-style cheese mixed with pomegranate juice. You take a bite. It's creamy, tart, floral and extremely confusing in a wonderful way. You immediately buy the tiniest jar. Next to it is a mat with bowls of dried milk coated in ground herbs. Traveler's milk, the vendor says. You suck it when your mouth is dry. You eye it suspiciously, he adds. Also good for cleaning wounds. Versatile. A woman near you is folding thin reeds into a little basket lined with fig leaves. She gently presses spoonfuls of soft cheese into it, shaping it like she's folding laundry. She sprinkles salt, presses a flat stone on top, and sets it aside. She doesn't even glance up. You ask how long before it's ready. Depends how long you can wait. Fair. A small crowd gathers near a wooden bench where a scribe is writing symbols onto clay discs. Their labels, each stamped with a maker's symbol and date. This is premium cheese destined for temple kitchens or wealthy homes. One reads, 2-day goat, clove spice, temple batch. Another simply, do not steal. You admire the confidence. Farther down, you pass a vendor offering a taste of something buried in ash. You hesitate, she insists. You try it. It's smoky, slightly sweet, and melts into your mouth with a strange warmth. Milk butter, she explains. Buried 2 nights. Safe now. That safe now is doing a lot of heavy lifting. One stall specializes in milk-fermented grain paste, a kind of hybrid dip. It's thick, salted, and filled with cracked barley. You taste a spoonful and are immediately reminded of school cafeteria food, but with better spices. Comforting, clingy, almost emotionally supportive. Nearby, you watch a man stir hot milk in a wide, shallow pan. A thin skin forms. He scoops it, folds it, stacks it. Layer cheese, he says, smiling faintly. Like pastry, but humble. He sprinkles dates on top. You ask for one, he gives you 2. Babylon had no refrigeration, so dairy had to be eaten fresh or transformed quickly, and they were masters of transformation. Even the gods ate curd. One temple record reads, 2 Marduk, 2 loaves, 3 measures of beer, and a vessel of pressed cheese. One assumes he appreciated the pairing. A clay tablet from the south lists a recipe for curd cakes with date honey and saffron. It's unclear whether it was dessert or breakfast. Either way, you're jealous. You pass a final stall where cheese is packed into clay pots sealed with wax. A narrow stick sticks out of the top. The vendor explains. You bury it in warm sand for 7 days. Then the wax pops. You don't ask what happens if it doesn't pop. Your basket is now heavy with soft cheese, odd spreads, and a mysterious puck, labeled only with a symbol for east wind. You assume it's metaphorical. The dairy section, for all its simplicity, feels oddly sacred. There's something timeless in the act of coaxing nourishment from something so fragile, and something deeply human in wanting to flavor it with garlic. You step carefully past a patch of spilled milk, resisting the urge to philosophize. Your next stop, the herbalist's, because every bloated belly and meat hangover needs a remedy, and Babylon had opinions. You leave behind the creamy world of curds and strange cheese patties, only to be pulled forward by something lighter, the unmistakable scent of green things. Sharp, earthy, a little bitter, a little sweet. You've arrived at Babylon's herbal row, and here, among the woven mats and shady cloth awnings, you get the sense you're not just shopping anymore, you re-entering a kind of open-air apothecary. The first thing that hits you is color. Sprigs of sage and thyme, bundles of mint tied with date twine, heaps of dried lavender like tiny purple clouds. Everything is laid out in small clay trays or wrapped tightly in red parcels. A woman with long silver hair and green-stained fingertips gestures toward a bowl of crumbled leaves. "For sleep," she says. You lean in. Smells like anise, crushed flowers, and something that reminds you of old parchment. She smiles, steep with milk. Then no thoughts, only dreams. Noted, in Babylon, herbs weren't just flavor, they were medicine, spellwork, ritual, bribe, perfume, and sometimes currency. A single handful of saffron could equal a week's pay. And the man behind you, holding a clay jar full of dried marigold, clearly knows he's guarding it like it might flee. You approach a stall where a younger herbalist arranges his goods in neat lines, each pile separated by a circle drawn in chalk. He labels them with little clay tablets. For cough, for headaches, for snakes, for good dreams, for no dreams at all. You pause at that last one. He shrugs. Some people sleep too hard. Some people not enough. There's an incense booth just beyond, its smoke curling lazily through the heat. A young girl fans a shallow bowl of glowing charcoal, dropping powdered resin into it by the pinch. A nearby bowl of crushed juniper and cedar is labeled temple ash. You take a sniff. It smells like lost memory and well-swept stone floors. You pass a man measuring powdered herbs on a balance scale, adding tiny chips of silver to compensate for weight. A trader opposite him is bartering with what appears to be a jar of honey and a single polished bone. Historians still argue whether Babylonian herb sellers had any kind of formal medical training. Some records suggest they learned through apprenticeships. Others say many herbalists were temple workers part healer. At least one tablet recommends chewing 7 leaves of bittergrass, then sleeping with a date pit under your tongue. Effective, debatable, entertaining, always. You stop at a stand with a sign painted in red ochre. For the belly that won't behave, the woman running it has 6 teeth, a kind smile, and about 15 kinds of dried roots. She offers you a taste of something she calls tiger root. It tastes like old leather soaked in regret. You buy 2. Next to her, a vendor offers a powder made from crushed roses and fennel. She recommends mixing it with date syrup for bad breath or bad luck, she's not sure which. You take a pinch and immediately sneeze. She nods solemnly. It's working. There's a jar labeled eye dust that you 90% sure isn't literal. You don't ask. A man near the river-facing side of the market is hawking live plants, thyme, rosemary, bitter lettuce, and what looks like baby papyrus. You ask him what it's for. He says, keeping the dead from staying. You pretend you didn't hear that. One clay tablet in the possession of a temple near Uruk lists a recipe for a protective stew. It includes mint, dried onion skins, barley mash, and a specific prayer to a lesser-known wind god. You consider making it, but the ingredients sound like something already fermenting in your basket. You're handed a bundle of dried mint and told to hang it above your bed. For snakes, dreams, and bad men, it seems to cover all the bases. You try a tea made from chamomile, dried pomegranate rind, and a whisper of licorice root. It's warm, floral, with a bitter kiss at the end. You immediately feel calmer, or maybe just impressed. One older herbalist whispers, her blends in pairs. Drink this for strength. Rub that for peace. Her hands are covered in powder. You're pretty sure she just sold someone a love charm, and maybe a foot bomb. You find a clay jar labeled lion sleep. The vendor raises an eyebrow as you approach. Very deep sleep, loud dreams. Careful when you wake up. You buy it. You also buy a pouch of something called dust for no regret. It's blue. You don't ask. At the far end of the herbal row, you spot a humble table with only 3 bowls. One contains a fine white powder salt from far to the south. One holds dried lemongrass. And the last, tiny red seeds. The vendor doesn't say a word. You point. He nods. You add it to your basket. A breeze picks up and carries the mingled scents of dried lavender, sweet fennel, crushed coriander, and sandalwood. You close your eyes for a second and imagine the quiet gardens from which all of this began, green beds tucked behind mud brick walls. Small goats, chewing everything they're not supposed to. Women humming lullabies while plucking leaves by moonlight. Babylon's herb row isn't just a grocery stop. It's a record of memory. A quiet rebellion against illness. And a way to speak softly to the divine without ever raising your voice. You breathe in one last blend of sharp and sweet, then turn toward the next stretch of market. It's not just time to eat or heal, it's time to cook. You're heading for the clay pots, grinding stones, and every spice this city can throw at you. Now that your basket overflows with dates, fish, cheese, and what might technically count as medicine, you find yourself drawn toward the unmistakable clatter and clang of preparation. This is no longer just about buying food. This is about what you do with it. Welcome to Babylon's Spice and Cookware Row, where flavor, fire, and function come together in glorious, earthen-scented chaos. You arrive to a field of clay, pots, bowls, jars, and dishes stacked high and wide. Some plain, some painted, some shaped like birds, lions, or wildly inaccurate gods. The first thing you see is a pot bigger than your torso. A sign propped next to it says soup for 30. You nod in respect. A woman is sorting pestles by weight, lining them up next to matching mortar like they're her children. She lifts one and gives it a tap. Too light, she mutters, then moves to the next. A potter nearby throws wet clay on a spinning stone. It wobbles dangerously. He slaps it with authority. Now it looks like a bowl again. Babylonians didn't have metal cookware like modern kitchens, but they mastered the art of fired clay. There were sauce vessels with narrow necks for pouring oils, wide-lipped cooking pots for stews, and flat griddles for baking barley cakes. Historians still argue whether open-flame cooking was more common indoors or out. Some homes had clay hearths inside. Others cooked in courtyards or rooftops. There's even a theory that communal ovens were shared among neighbors. Because nothing says trust like handing over your goat stew to someone else's uncle. A vendor offers you a sample from a small clay cup. It's a lentil stew, spiced with coriander and something smoky. It warms your tongue without burning it. You ask, what's in it? He smiles and whispers, whatever I had, fair. Just beyond the cookware stalls, the spice vendors begin. It's a sensory ambush. You walk into a cloud of cumin, cardamom, crushed dried limes, and the soft heat of something It tingles your nose, makes your eyes water, and reminds you that food isn't just fuel, it's theater. There's a man selling what he calls sun-fire mix. You ask, what's in it? He just points at his nose and says, you'll feel it first here. You do. It's aggressive. A younger vendor nearby lays out piles of color. Bright yellow turmeric, deep red sumac, brown cumin seeds, tiny green fennel pods, and a clay dish of dried rose petals that look too pretty to eat. You ask what those are for. He shrugs. Stew? Or weddings? You buy a handful. There's a spice blend labeled for guests you like. Next to it, one labeled for guests you don't. You buy both. Balance is key. One woman offers you a taste of what she calls sweet salt, a mix of crushed dried dates, rock salt, and powdered fig bark. You sprinkle a little on your tongue. It's bizarrely good, like trail mix met sea, air and shook hands. You take a pout. You walk past a row of grinding tables where men and women lean into stone mortar, crushing garlic, peppercorns, dried onions, and who knows what into thick, fragrant pastes. A child near one stall flies off a bowl of fresh sesame oil, while his mother scrapes chili mash into small jars and ties them with reeds. You try one on a barley crisp. It makes your nose run and your eyes close. You love it. One particularly serious vendor shows you a spice tabulator, literal tablet, baked from clay. It lists instructions for preparing a spiced lamb stew. Add garlic 3 times. Stir before the sun moves. Add cumin until the smell pleases the cook. That's the entire recipe. No measurements, no rules, just ancient culinary vibes. There's a legend scratched into the edge of another tablet that says, "The best food does not wait." You take that to mean, taste everything. A roasted onion dipped in coriander paste, a vegan chili cake, a skewer of lamb rolled in sesame and dusted with something that smells like sweet dust and firewood. All of it served in tiny clay bowls, eaten with fingers, no pretense. You pass by a stall where spice blends are sold in tiny linen bags, each stamped with a symbol: the sun, a bird, a pair of eyes, a hand. You ask what they mean. The vendor says, "That one makes food disappear. That one makes husbands come home. That one makes them stay gone." You buy the bird. There's a boy wrapping dried onion bulbs in cloth soaked with vinegar. He says it's for stomach aches, or to chase away snakes, or maybe both. One tablet from the palace kitchens lists spices allocated for the New Year feast. 5 of dried dill, 3 of cumin, and 1 jar labeled simply for the king's mood. You try not to imagine what that smells like. You spot a woman sprinkling crushed herbs into a wide dish of stewed beans, then stirring with a reed spoon so carefully it's like she's casting a spell. When she offers you a taste, it's warm, earthy, just a little sweet. She says nothing. You nod in thanks. You look down at your basket. It now smells like half a feast, half a remedy, and a quarter of a dream. You've got enough flavor to throw your own Babylonian banquet. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to pick up a few sweets, because no grocery list, ancient or otherwise, is complete without a little sugar on top. By now, your feet are sore. Your basket is a scent balm of contradictions, and your sense of time has long been surrendered to the river of this ancient marketplace. But something sweet on the breeze, lighter than the fish, warmer than the herbs, pulls you toward what might be the final temptation. Babylonian sweets. You don't see them right away. They're not shouting like the meat sellers, nor sparkling like the spice vendors. But once you notice the little red trays, carefully stacked with golden, sticky treats, you realize you've wandered into the dessert alley. And it's glorious. The first stall offers what the vendor calls date bricks. Thick, chewy rectangles made of mashed dates, barley flour, chopped nuts, and a drizzle of syrup so dark it reflects the sun. You break off a corner and bite in. It's dense, moist, satisfying. Not sugary, like candy, more like energy stored in edible time. Babylon didn't have cane sugar or chocolate, but that didn't stop them from making dessert feel indulgent. Sweetness came from dates, honey, boiled fruit syrups, or reduced wine, and they mixed it with, well, just about anything edible. You pass a wide, shallow tray where tiny sesame balls rest in tidy rows. The vendor offers one. It's nutty, floral, with a hint of cinnamon. She grins and says, "Chew, slow." It gets happier. Across from her, a young girl is folding fig leaves around sticky globs of candied almonds. You watch her for a while. Hands moving so quickly, it's like the sweets are hiding from the heat. You buy 2 bundles. She adds a third when her mother isn't looking. Historians still argue whether Babylonian sweets were daily indulgences or festival fare. Some tablets imply frequent desert making, while others mention them only as temple offerings or wedding gifts. One clay fragment even describes a dessert for honoring Ishtar, a cake made from flour, dried figs, sesame oil, and honey, shaped like a crescent moon. A vendor nearby is drizzling honey over spiced barley cakes. Steam rises as the syrup hits the still warm surface. He hands you a piece. It's chewy, with a soft crunch from crushed pistachios. You ask what it's called. He says, "Good afternoon." You get the feeling names are optional around here. A low table nearby is stacked with bowls of pomegranate seeds, some candied, some soaked in syrup, others dusted with powdered herbs. You try one that's been soaked in vinegar and fig juice. It hits your tongue like a firework, and you're not sure if it's dessert or a dare. You hear laughter nearby. A woman is showing off a cake, decorated with small pieces of dried fruit, pressed into a flower shape. She explains, it's for a naming ceremony. Then she adds, or for getting someone to forgive you. You nod solemnly and take 2. A few stalls over, a man is grilling thin slices of melon over hot clay, then dipping them in date syrup and ground sesame. It smells like summer and burnt sugar. You try one and nearly cry. Too hot, he asks. No, you say. Too beautiful. A quiet vendor in a shadowed corner hands you something that looks like a lump of tar wrapped in linen. Wine candy, he says. You're skeptical. You bite. It's sharp, sour sweet, a little bitter, and then strangely wonderful. Wine reduction mixed with fruit mash, rolled with herbs and dried in the sun. It sticks to your teeth and your memory. One stall specializes in sweet porridge, sold warm in little clay cups with wooden spoons sticking out. Barley, milk, dates, and something florarose. Maybe. You sip carefully. It's creamy, comforting, and feels like someone is patting your back from across centuries. Nearby, a child dips fried chickpea balls into honey and hands you one before sprinting off. No one stops him. This seems to be a normal exchange rate. A vendor with a sense of humor has labeled his jar of candied onion slices. Sweet but honest. You taste one. He's not wrong. You're confused, but not disappointed. And then there's the syrup booth. A wide stall stacked with ceramic jars and red baskets full of syrup-soaked fruits, dates, figs, quinces, apples. Some are fermented slightly, giving them a heady perfume. Others are soaked in spiced wine reductions so thick they barely move. You try a piece of syrup-soaked fig, soft as velvet and warm from the sun. The flavor is deep, spiced, floral, and dark. You feel like a high priest of desert. You buy a jar. The vendor nods once and hands you a wooden spoon. No words. A group of women gather round a fire pit, dropping nuts into boiling syrup and then rolling them in crushed seeds. The smoke smells sweet, nutty, and nostalgic. Even if you've never been here before, your stomach recognizes something ancient in this moment. One final tray offers night cakes, small, spiced barley cakes packed with honey and ground herbs, said to keep dreams soft and sleep long. You buy 3. You consider eating one right there, but something in your brain says, save it for when the quiet comes. You take its advice. As you step out of the desert alley, your basket heavier and your sweet tooth fully satisfied, you realize something profound. Babylonian desert wasn't about sugar crashes or show-stopping presentation. It was about warmth, balance, memory, and little moments of pleasure tucked between harder parts of life. You take a long breath, scented with honey herbs, and the last echo of grilled melon. Ahead, you see familiar figures, people gathering around jugs, pouring drinks into clay cups, and raising them to the sky. Let's talk about Babylonian beverages. Your footsteps grow slower now, partly because your basket has become the weight of a medium-sized donkey, and partly because the smell of barley beer has begun to call to something very old and very tired in your soul. You follow it like a half-sleepwalker, and soon you find yourself on the edge of a noisy, wonderfully chaotic part of the market. The beverage section. And yes, Babylonians took their drinks seriously. They didn't just sip. They brewed, infused, fermented, filtered, prayed, and occasionally passed out. Sometimes in that exact order. You see it before you smell it. A low table stacked with jugs, sealed with woven red caps, each marked with a clay tag tied around the neck. One tag reads, light beer, another strong beer, and your personal favorite, don't drink alone. The first thing you're handed is a small cup made from baked clay, no handle, no fuss. Inside is kos, a barley-based beer so thick it could almost count as soup. It's murky, sour, a little chewy. You try not to chew. This isn't modern beer, it's closer to a fermented barley porridge that just so happens to get you tipsy. And it's the Babylonian national drink. Workers drank it, scribes drank it, priests drank it. Babies may or may not have been weaned on it. Even the gods had their share. Offerings to Marduk, Ishtar, and Enlil often included beersome temples, receiving hundreds of jars per year. One recovered temple tablet lists 47 jars of beer for the gods, followed by the oddly specific note, 3 spilled, none on purpose. Historians still argue whether this beer was filtered through cloth, reeds, or just teeth. You choose not to imagine it and keep sipping. Next to the beer tables, a man is pounding dried dates with a stone pestle, then scraping the paste into a large ceramic jar. He adds water, a handful of spices, and a splash of something pungent. He stirs, waits, then pours you a cup. It's date wine, sweet, dark, with a heat that starts behind your teeth and works its way to your thoughts. You ask if it's strong. He says, only if you're weak. You say nothing and take another sip. A row of clay amphorae lines a stone shelf behind him, each stoppered with beeswax and tied with string. He points to one and says, 4 weddings. Another, 4 funerals, and one with a purple mark, for nights you don't talk about. You buy that one. Just beyond the brewers, a quieter corner of the beverage section deals in infused waters and cooling drinks. A young girl offers you a sip of something in a translucent red cup. It's chilled water flavored with crushed mint, fennel, and just a touch of honey. Light, clean, soothing. You ask what it's for. She says, washing the heat from your bones. You want a whole jug. You get a cup. Another stand offers a cloudy drink called milk water, made by thinning yogurt with river water, then adding herbs and salt. It sounds like something that should be a punishment, but somehow it's refreshing. Salty, sour, cold, perfect for a sunburnt afternoon. Babylon had no ice, of course, but they understood temperature. Clay jugs were buried in shaded earth or stored in wind-cooled niches to bring them to a chill. Some even suspended drink jars in river currents to cool them before feasts. A man next to you demonstrates lowering a sealed pot into a small trough of running water, then lifting it out and popping the wax seal with a twist of his thumb. Inside, a fermented tamarind drink. Sweet, Sharp, just this side of dangerous. You drink too fast. He smiles too wide. At the far end, a scribe is listing quantities into a clay tablet as a woman pours samples into tiny tasting bowls. Beer, wine, vinegar, water, mint water, pomegranate syrup, fig juice. She offers you a bowl of sour pomegranate water mixed with basil. It tastes like you're waking up inside someone else's dream. You take a second bowl. She nods in approval. You watch two men argue over which drink pairs best with fish stew. One says beer, the other says citrus water, which is probably just sour grape juice with ambition. A nearby tablet fragment claims, beer for the mouth, but water for the spirit. You're unsure if it's poetic or just good advice. One vendor is hawking sweet black water, made from crushed licorice root. He hands you a sip with a grin. It tastes like melted memories and maybe shoe polish. You don't finish it, but beside him, a stall offers rose-infused wine, its color glowing in the afternoon light, like stained glass. You sip and feel like someone just complimented your past life. Babylon didn't drink casually. They drank with intention. To celebrate, to remember, to forget, to survive the sun. Every class of citizen had access to some form of beverage, beer rations for laborers, wine for elites, herbal waters for everyone in between. There's even record of priests debating the exact ritual sequence for pouring libations. You imagine it probably ended with someone spilling something anyway. As you prepare to leave the beverage row, your basket clinks with the weight of jugs, jars, and good decisions. You feel warm, light, buzzed in a no-regrets kind of way. And ahead of you, a quieter part of the market. Not food, not drink, but the things that tie a meal together. Plates, linens, oils, perfumes. The final details of Babylonian domestic life. Let's go see what made dinner feel like home. You wander into the next stretch of the market, your arms humming from the weight of clay and syrup, your mouth still tingling with pomegranate basil, and your head pleasantly soft from fermented barley logic. But the mood here shifts. The shouting fades. The air smells less like food, and more like earth, oil, and old fabric warmed by the sun. This isn't where you eat, it's where you prepare, where you serve, decorate, and make your mealtime feel like more than just survival. Welcome to Babylon's domestic goods section. A patchwork of utility and ritual, scent and softness, all tucked between sun-baked walls. The first table you pass is lined with ceramic dishes, stacked by shape and purpose. Flat platters for communal stews, shallow bowls for grains and saucers, and small lipped cups for oil, water, or whatever passes. For dessert on a Tuesday, the vendor taps one plate with her knuckle. It rings softly. Good clay, fired twice, will survive a marriage or two. You nod as if you understand the implication. You buy one. Nearby, a man sells drinking vessels with tiny carvings along the rim. Fish, leaves, stars, and one suspiciously specific lion wearing earrings. He grins and says, "That one brings luck." Or story, sometimes both. You choose the one with stars. Seems safer. Historians still argue whether these decorated dishes were status symbols or everyday items. Some homes likely had a mix. Plain for daily use, painted for guests or temple feasts. And there's a theory that children were taught table manners using bowls carved with cautionary animals. Eat too fast, the lion gets you. Drop your spoon, that's on the jackal. Next to the dishes is a narrow row of textiles, linens, wool cloths, woven mats made from reeds or flax. Most are faded from sun and time, but a few shine with indigo, saffron, and madder red dyes. A woman offers you a folded table covering. It smells of time, storage, and something floral, hand-washed in river water, dried between olives and prayer. You believe her. A little farther along, someone is serving spoons made from carved wood and smooth horn. They're not uniforms, are long and elegant, others short and stubby like they were made in a hurry by someone very hungry. You pick one up. It fits your hand perfectly. You put it in your basket without asking the price. One stall sells tiny jars of perfume and aromatic oil, lined up in order from softest to boldest. You sniff the first. Jasmine, myrrh, and something sweet like honey left in the sun. The second, rose, almond, and sandalwood. The third burns your nose a little. The vendor beams, worn by warriors or people who cook fish. You buy a soft one. Scattered between the textiles and oil stalls are tools, grinding stones, red brushes, ladles, and strainers made from tightly woven linen. A man demonstrates how to pour lentil stew through one. It comes out smooth, fragrant, and ready for guests who don't like surprises in their soup. One stall has only a single object, a stone hand mirror, worn smooth with time. Its surface is barely reflective, more suggestion than clarity. You pick it up, and for a second, your own image blurs into something older, gentler, almost familiar. You set it down carefully. Next to that, a tall man sells incense burners shaped like animals. One is a ram, another is a fish, one might be a turtle or a very tired dog. He lights one for you. Smoke curls out of its nose in slow ribbons carrying sandalwood, cedar, and crushed citrus rind. The smell is anchoring, like the memory of home you don't remember having. Babylonians didn't just eat together. They gathered. They prepared spaces with intention, laid cloth, lit oil, poured water over hands from simple pitchers, offered the first bite to gods, guests, or ghosts depending on who showed up first. One clay tablet found near Nipper reads, "Clean the space, fragrant the air, face the west, break bread," part prayer, part instruction manual. A group of children nearby are setting out small clay dishes in a row, each filled with colored sand, seeds, and water. Their mother explains their plain feast. Pretending to serve kings and goddesses, she says they practice hospitality before they even know how to cook, because serving is a kind of story. You believe her, too. One man sells bundles of red napkins folded into simple knots. Another sells tiny carved pomegranate charms meant to hang by the cooking fire. For luck, for sweetness, for something to look at while the barley simmers. You buy one with a chipped side. Flawed things have better stories. Before you leave, you pause by a quiet stall where a woman is stitching a linen cloth, the edges are frayed, the center embroidered with a rising sun. You ask what it's for. She says, a table, a floor, a blessing, depends on the day. She hands it to you and says nothing more. You roll it carefully and place it on top of everything else in your basket. As you walk forward, the market seems to part for you. You're heavier now, not just with goods but with ritual, memory, tools, stories, and soon your slow stroll will arrive at the last bend in this grocery journey. Not what the Babylonians bought, but what they sacrificed, because sometimes what you eat, what you offer, and what you give away are all part of the same meal. You step softly now, the voices of the market receding behind you like a dream loosening its grip. The air changes again, more incense, less stew. You begin to notice symbols carved into doorways, small altars nestled into corners, and offerings placed not beside the vendors, but in front of the gods. You've entered the sacred edge of the marketplace, where food stops being just nourishment and becomes a conversation with the divine. Babylon was a city of offerings, to gods, to ancestors, to spirits in the walls, and names written in clay. It wasn't superstition, it was protocol. You didn't just eat, you shared. The first thing you see is a stall draped in white cloth, low to the ground. On it, bowls of lentils, barley, dried fruit, and cakes shaped like stars. A woman, face lined with years and soot, kneels before it with a small cup of water. She mutters something soft, dips her fingers into the cup, and flicks droplets over the food. You ask her why. For the one who left yesterday, she replies, and for the ones who might leave tomorrow. You nod. And maybe, for the first time today, you don't ask more questions. Just behind her, there's a small shrine on earthen platform decorated with painted tiles and fresh herbs. At the center, a statue of Ninkasi, goddess of beer and brewing. She holds a bowl in one hand and a stalk of barley in the other. At her feet, 4 little cups, each filled with a different liquid, one foamy, one dark, one sour, one bright red. The vendor watching the shrine explains, one for joy, one for grief, one for balance, one just in case. You like the honesty of that last one. Historians still argue whether offerings were mostly symbolic or meant to be consumed later by priests. Some temples burned the food entirely, others placed it outside and let time or animals carry it away. A few records even suggest that leftover offerings were redistributed to the poor. A sacred snack economy. You pass another offering table, this one dedicated to Ish. It's brighter, jewels, fruit, oil, lamps, and a bowl of rosewater. A young girl kneels beside it, carefully placing pomegranate seeds in a circle. She smiles, without looking up, and whispers, for love. And for courage, you consider leaving one of your nightcakes. You do. Another shrine is tucked inside a shallow alcove, where 3 bowls rest on a woven mat, grain, water, and what appears to be milk and honey mixed together. The man watching over it explains it's an offering to Nisibah, goddess of writing and knowledge. You ask if she eats it. He shrugs. She reads it. Fair enough. Babylonians believed that food could carry messages, not just through prayer, but in form. Round cakes for the moon, sweet wine for good, omens, flat bread for remembrance. Some offerings were shaped to resemble the thing they represented. There are records of sacrificial bread molded into the shapes of goats, birds, even stars. You imagine biting into a pastry shaped like a sheep and wondering if you'd just angered the wrong celestial committee. One older man walks by with a jar of honey in one hand and a clay idol in the other. He pauses at a shrine, murmurs something low and slow, and tips the honey onto the stone's feet. You ask him what he said. May your sweetness return when mine is gone. You feel your chest tighten, and you do not ask anything else. There's a scent, now burnt herbs and bread crust, acrid and comforting all at once. You follow it to a small group gathered around a clay fire basin. A priest sprinkles dried mint and barley over the coals, then adds a chunk of cooked lamb, glistening with oil. The smoke rises quickly. He chants something rhythmic, gentle, as the crowd drops food into the flame. Bread, small dried fish, even wine poured into the ash. You're told this is a shared fire for ancestors, strangers, gods, and regrets. No one watches too closely what anyone else offers. Some things are only between the flame and the giver. You step away slowly, passing another altar where an oil lamp burns beside a flatbread split down the middle. A cracked tablet nearby reads, "For the unseen guest." You leave a sliver of cheese beside it. It feels right, and finally you reach the river's edge, where a low stone table holds bowls, of grain and dried herbs weighted with pebbles. A man with soot on his face and a red pen behind his ear sits cross-legged beside it. He looks up. "Don't take," he says, "not even a crumb. You weren't planning to, but it's good to be reminded." He gestures toward the water, for the ones who don't return. Soldiers, sailors, people who drowned with their names unspoken. He offers you a pinch of grain. You toss it gently into the Euphrates. The ripples carry it away. You sit down, heavy-basketed, light-hearted, quiet. You followed Babylon's grocery list from the fields to the flames, from fruit to fish, from sweet to sacred. And now it's almost time to leave, but not before you pack it all up. Say your silent thanks and let the city exhale with you. You rise from the riverbank slowly, clay dust on your elbows, your fingers still tingling from the grain you scattered into the water. The hum of the market has quieted behind you now, like someone gently lowering the volume on a memory, but your basket is still full. And there's one final stop before the day ends. Because even in Babylon, especially in Babylon, you couldn't bring food home without accounting for it. You're heading into the world of records, tablets, and tallies. The bureaucratic belly of the ancient city. And yes, Babylon had receipts. You pass under a shaded walkway where a line of men and women wait patiently, each holding bundles of grain, jugs of beer, wheels of cheese, and long, tired sighs. At the front of the line, a scribe sits behind a smooth slab of stone. He wears a clay-simjid tunic, a frown of intense concentration, and an air of someone who has seen too many lentil declarations in his day. He holds a reed stylus, its tip squared and blackened from use. To his right, a damp tray of fresh clay tablet. To his left, stacks of tablets already etched, hardened in the sun, labeled by notched marks. You sneak a glance. Some tablets are basic 10 loaves to temple, 5 jars beer to market. Others are more dramatic. Grain missing, possible rats, or cousin. One tablet simply reads, "Do not trust man with goat tattoo." You like that one. You approach another scribe seated cross-legged by a lower table. He's younger, more amused. He looks at your basket, raises an eyebrow, and says, "That's either a feast or a confession." You tell him it's a little of both. He offers to help you tally your haul. You set down each item as he nods, scratches, scribes, to date bricks. 1 cheese with herb crust, a fish that's either fresh or extremely brave. 1 cloth with embroidered sun, and 3 nightcakes. Risky, he grins. The Babylonians weren't just farmers and traders, they were documenters. If something could be written down in clay, it was food taxes, recorded offerings, logged, family dinners, probably noted somewhere by an over-enthusiastic uncle. Historians still argue whether every household had its own food records, or if tablets were mostly for trade and temple use, but there's no doubt Babylon ran on data, and dinner didn't happen until you paid your due or proved your goods. 1 recovered tablet from Sipper reads, "Fish rejected. Smelled of swamp." Another, "Date syrup. Seller swears not by gods, but by goat." And your personal favorite, "Barley arrived late. Claimed traffic of donkeys." You finish your tally, and a scribe hands you a tiny stamped tokona kind of receipt. It's no bigger than your thumb and bears a carved seal, a crescent moon and 3 dots. You ask what it means. He shrugs. Means you're allowed to walk home with your stomach full and your soul unworried. Not a bad system. You wander to a quieter corner where temple scribes copy food-related rituals into larger tablets. One is carving a hymn about sacred barley. Another is documenting quantities of honey distributed to priests during the Festival of Lights. A third is copying a list of animals not to be eaten in summer. At the bottom, someone has added in smaller script. Unless you are very persuasive. Beside them, a small girl rolls clay balls and presses tiny impressions into them like pretend receipts. Her mother smiles and says, "She's practicing." Babylonians believed that food came from the gods, and thus its journey had to be honored. From field to market to mouth, you could steal food, sure, but the gods were watching. And maybe the goat tattoo guy too. You pass a wall lined with clay plaques listing seasonal market cycles. Month of planting barley, month of first fish, month of sweet melons, month of bad water, month of beer festivals. Time was measured in flavor, in ripening and rot, in the slow rhythm of seasons pressing themselves into bread and stew. You take one last look at your basket. Inside is more than just food. It's a history, a geography, a quiet promise that even 4,000 years ago, people wanted dinner to taste good, to be shared, to mean something. You nod at the scribe, offer your thanks, and take the long path back through the soft stone streets. The sun dips low over the river. The sound of the market fades into scattered laughter, the occasional goat complaint, and the tap-tap-tap of red pens against wet clay. And as you pass a small alleyway, you hear someone call out, "Next time, bring your own cup." You smile, because even in the ancient world, you don't walk through life without returning the borrowed bowl. The light is long now, stretching golden fingers across the brick roads as you make your way back through the fading hum of ancient Babylon. The streets are quieter. Vendors have packed their wares. Children race in dusty loops around red baskets. Smoke from cook fires rises slowly into the dusk like sleepy prayer. You follow a familiar route through the shadow of temple columns, past the fig tree that leans to far west, until you reach the low, warm walls of home. You set your basket down. Its contents shift and settle with a muffled clink of bowls, the rustle of linens, the quiet sigh of herbs still releasing their scent. And just like that, your long grocery walk becomes dinner. But not just any dinner, a Babylonian one. Inside, the room is already prepared. A simple table sits on a woven mat. Clay lamps glow softly in the corners, casting flickers of orange light onto walls, painted with fading gods and flowering vines. You unfold the linen cloth, the one with the rising sun. It fits the table perfectly. Of course it does. You place your dishes down one by one. The honey-glazed barley cakes, the cheese wrapped in fig leaf, the date syrup with its sticky, dark promise. A bowl of grilled fish rests beside barley stew, both garnished with handfuls of green things you still can't quite name. You pour the beer carefully into a cup shaped like a lion, and sip. It's as thick as earlier, and still refuses to be elegant. No matter tonight, it's about ritual, not refinement. You light a piece of incense. The turtle-shaped burner exhales its smoke like a creature just waking from a 1,000-year nap. You pause, not for a photo, not for a perfect plate, but for a moment that stretches backward through millennia. People in this same city, on this same ground, once placed their bowls down in just the same way. They, too, hoped the bread would rise, that the stew wouldn't burn, that the guests would show up, and the gods would be kind. There's a small sliver of night cake resting on a painted saucer. You save it for last. You're not even sure if you'll eat it tonight. It just feels important to know it's there. As you settle in, feet bare against the cool clay floor, belly full of market and memory, you feel the hush of Babylon settle around you. A hush that says, yes, there were empires. Yes, there were wars. Yes, there were tablets and gods and impossible kings. But also, there were groceries, lists, tiny arguments over lentils, laughter over melted cheese, a love letter written into clay and smeared by a tear before it could dry. Babylon wasn't just a city of stone and story. It was a city of taste, of ritual, of ordinary people feeding each other through time. You take one last bite, one last sip, and let the city fade behind your closed eyes. Let the moon rise over Zip. Let the gods sleep. Let the barley fields whisper. Let the day go. Now that we've returned from the echoing streets of Babylon, let's allow the dust to settle a little. Your breath is slower. Your arms are lighter. The warmth of fire and sweet grain still lingers somewhere near your chest. You can feel the rhythm of clay soft under your fingertips, the quiet laughter of market women, the gentle clink of jugs being filled, all of it now softening into memory. Let your thoughts drift like river reeds floating along the Euphrates. Let the smells of spice and oil fade into dream. The lion-headed cups and crescent moon cakes can rest on the shelf of your imagination now, where they will wait until the next time you walk those ancient stalls. With each breath, the stories grow more distant, and your body grows heavier with the comfort of knowing that even thousands of years ago, someone somewhere made a grocery list because they loved someone enough to feed them. You are safe here. You are still. You're full of bread, barley, and gentle time. The past has eaten with you tonight, and now it lets you rest. Close your eyes. Let the lamps flicker low. Let your thoughts settle like clay left out to dry. You've walked far enough for today. Sleep well, time traveler. Sweet dreams.